So Roz, as an interior designer who now shifts your head from the clinical care to the well-being to what Deborah is describing as a basically very human-centered, individual-centered place that recognizes all our needs and all our needs for light and air and companionship and community and all those things that she just put out there. I mean, certainly a lot of places aren't designed like that. So how would you translate this to kind of a more residential feeling, that where people live and how people live, and what should they be looking at, thinking about on the basis of what Deborah just described? I mean, just the bringing of the morgue to the sunlit room and create and saying that these are your first patients. I mean, that is the humanist gesture of all gestures. So how do we begin to translate that to everyday living?
So one of the first steps in the evidence-based process is to look at baseline knowledge and understand where there are prior examples that you could start to build or at least formulate the questions for a good research project or build a hypothesis for the outcomes you're trying to achieve on a design project. So whether we're designing a medical school or we're designing a home for a family or a single person, some of the same questions would arise. And so most recently, I had a hospital project ask us about how to create a community of well-being and how they might look at certain design interventions. So what we did was we did a study to see who was doing the best work right now in the health and well-being space. And several folks came up, but the one that I keep going back to was a project that many of you have heard about, the Blue Zones Project. And Dan Buettner, who worked for National Geographic, was given the job to go find communities that live good, healthy lives and live long lives. And so the Blue Zone name came from these circles that they put on the map with a blue ballpoint pen, and they called them Blue Zones. And they identified a series of activities and qualities within life that promoted health and well-being and, more importantly, longevity. He since has gone on to build programs. He works with cities to develop these blue zones. But many of the qualities, we haven't done a good enough job of relating back to design interventions. And not too long ago, I gave a lecture about putting design back into evidence-based design. And they're just really good design principles. So first and foremost is having access to nature, having access to outdoors. So it's not just having the amount of window space that we put in a very gray Columbus, Ohio project. There is no daylight there, by the way, I'm just here to tell you. I mean, there's sunlight, there's daylight, it's very gray. But this access to an open area and to the architects and planners, how you site a building, it's not about parallel to the street. I say it's parallel to the sun. So even if in your building isn't faced that way, find the room that is parallel to morning light. Morning light is a booster for many populations that we look at in acute care health, but for all of us, it's just kind of nice to wake up to morning sun. I have an elderly mom. I always say, just go to the sun, go to the window where the sun is if you can't get out in the middle of winter. So daylight becomes important. Love and support is huge in the Buettner study. So how you create places for community, and I think you've done a beautiful job of that.
Can I support the two things you just said? So the sun, we did shade studies, and I positioned that building so that as the sun rose and set, the piazza, the circular space in the middle, would have a maximum amount of shade all day long so that people could be outside, because in Florida, it's very sunny. So that was the sun piece. And then the other thing you talked about was the social interaction.
Love and support.
And love and support. And I don't know what they told you on the tour, but it was very important to me. Most medical schools are student spaces on 2 floors. and faculty and administration on the top floors. And what I said, I don't want that because I want students, faculty, and in administration to have to bump into each other all the time. So we've got a library on the second floor with some offices on the second floor and small group classrooms. On the third floor, administrative offices, that's where I am. By the way, I gave the faculty the penthouse. And we have our clinical skills center and our technology offices there. So there's a student and administrative space. Top floor is faculty. That's where the anatomy and microscopy labs are. So the students are all over the building, and so are we. So you can't go to the restroom and not, run into a faculty member or a student. And, so far it seems to be working.
So Deborah,
Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?